organize right to work for public sector unions throughout the United States. And so we're here today to demonstrate our opposition to the Supreme Court's Janus decision, and more importantly, to demonstrate solidarity with labor unions around the U.S. Today and over the last several days, hundreds of thousands of workers in the U.S. have been demonstrating in order to show their support for public sector labor unions and to show the value of collective action and solidarity. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. We've got several speakers lined up for today. We're going to hear from Mike Honey, and he's going to talk to us about the history of public sector workers and unions. Heather Reuters will speak with us about her experiences as a public sector union member. We have Anders Ibsen, who is with the Tacoma City Council. He's going to talk about the importance of public unions to the city of Tacoma. And then I'll wrap up with a few important points about unions to kind of send us on our way. So at this point, I want to turn things over to Mike Honey.
Woo!
So just a little couple of minute history lesson. A lot of these issues start out in the American South, where it has been anti-union forever. And I just finished a book, To the Promised Land, Martin Luther King and the Fight for Economic Justice. Ooh. And people are going to be gathering in Memphis and Atlanta and other places on April 4th, which will be 50 years since King was killed there. And in this book, I go back through King's story and what he has to say about economic justice. And it all goes back to the idea of cheap wages, which starts with slavery, which is the cheapest wage you can get. You know, it's somebody that gets paid nothing. And union organizing in the late 19th century and the 20th century succeeded in getting people together to demand their rights, to demand freedoms that they didn't have, and to demand a living wage. And so, you know, over various years, we made a lot of progress through the 1910s and the New Deal era of the 30s, and again more in the 40s. And so at one point, unions were very strong in the United States, and there are a group of people around the Koch brothers in Kansas, petroleum oligarchs, who have been funding right-to-work laws ever since the 1940s. And they started out in the South doing this state by state. And King said about this, he worked against these laws and he stopped a couple of them from getting passed. He said, these are anti-union measures, misleadingly called right-to-work laws, rob us of our civil rights and our job rights, and guarantee no rights and no work. Their purpose is to destroy labor unions and the freedom of collective bargaining, for which unions have approved wages and working conditions for everyone. And this is what's at stake now in the arguments before the U.S. Supreme Court. 28 states have adopted right-to-work laws, including my home state of Michigan, which used to be a union stronghold. And what they're doing with this is giving workers a way of opting out so that they undermine the membership of the union. King died fighting around this very principle on April 4th, 1968. The Memphis sanitation strike started on February 12th, and we just had a big reunion in Memphis of people working around the Fight for 15 today, and I've addressed that group, and we're going to have big marches there in April again. And what happened in Memphis was workers had no union, had no rights. In sanitation, they were treated as disposable. They could be fired for no reason at all. They could come into work, not get any work that day, and be sent home with no pay. If they got hurt, too bad for them. A couple of workers were killed in the back of a sanitation packer, and all they got was $500 for their families to bury the two men. Ugh. No compensation, no workman's rights, no nothing. And so they started organizing a union, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the very union that's at stake in the Janus case. Janus is a guy who is covered by AFSCME, which protects his rights and wages and so forth, but he doesn't want to pay either union dues or even representation fees. So the ruling is that you don't have to belong to a union, but you do have to pay representation fees if you're represented by a union. And so the issue in Memphis became, the mayor of Memphis said, you can have a union if you want, but we'll never sign a contract and we'll never deduct union dues from your paychecks. And the reason he did that was that he knew that if you don't deduct those dues, you'll never have a union. I mean, you have to have dues. Any organization has to have dues. You can't have a staff, you can't have an office, you can't be effective with no money, right? And workers put themselves together with the agreement that we're going to pay union dues, just like we're doing here with Faculty Forward and SEIU. And so you agree to sacrifice a little bit of money in order to have an organization and to have a staff and pay people like Devin to get out here and do stuff. Yeah. And so they fought that strike for 6 weeks around that very issue. No, we will never deduct union dues from your paycheck. And that's what King was there fighting for. And ironically now, the very thing that King died for is now on the table with the Supreme Court. What they finally did in Memphis was they made an agreement where union dues were deducted by some subsidiary group instead of the city council. They sent in somebody from the President of the United States to settle that strike. It took a lot of lives and a lot of pain, just to get that basic right to be able to have union dues. Now, people think of this as, oh, this is bad, I have to pay to the union. So if you put this wedge in there, well, you can get union representation without paying to the union. Then what do you think people are going to do? They say, oh, good, I'm represented, so end of story, no more union dues. Next thing you know, no more union. And Scott Walker pulled this ploy in Wisconsin in 2010. It was aimed exactly at public employees, like those of us who work for the state of Washington, aimed exactly at them. And teachers and public employee unions have lost more than half of their membership as a result. And eventually you just lose the whole deal. So, this is not a small thing, it's a very big thing. Last point, if we lose in the Supreme Court, the whole motto of the labor movement is solidarity, and you stay together and you fight for the long haul. And we've had ups and downs in labor history of success and failure. And we're now in the era of the oligarchs, people like Putin, people like Trump. We see these oligarchs all over the world because all the money has been funneled up with these few people. So there's going to be a reaction. People are going to fight back against this. Mm-hmm. And if we don't fight back, shame on us. So, teach you one verse. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. For what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? For in union we are strong. Here's our theme. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For in union we are strong. So it sounds like I'm kind of singing almost by myself here.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For in union we are strong.
Solidarity!
Yeah!
So there are a couple of traditions associated with the labor movement, a couple of ways we typically demonstrate our solidarity at events like this, and one of them is through song. And so Mike just helped us participate in that method of demonstrating solidarity. But another tradition at rallies like this is some chanting, right? What's a workers' rally without some chants? So several of you have some chant sheets that have been handed out to the crowd. And I'd like to take a couple minutes to do a couple of these chants together and really show our solidarity as a group. All right, so if you have your sheet, I'd like to do the third chant from the top. And for those of you who don't have access to a sheet, this chant goes, "They got money, they got lies. We fight back, we organize." All right, all together now. They got money, they got lies, we fight back, we organize. They got money, they got lies, we fight back, we organize. One more time. They got money, they got lies, we fight back, we organize. All right, let's do one more. We'll do one more of these together before our next speaker. All right, let's do the second from the top. This one goes, "Right to work is right to lose. A working union's what we choose. Right to work is right to lose. A working union's what we choose. Right to work is right to lose. A working union's what we choose. Right to work is right to lose. A working union's what we choose." All right, thanks everybody. Okay, at this point I want to welcome our next speaker for the day, Heather Reuters.
Thank you. So I've worked for the university.
Closer.
No, sorry. So I've worked for the university for over 10 years, and it is my driving passion to support students in helping achieve their dreams and goals. I'm an accommodation specialist, and what that means is that I help students with disabilities do the work, because at the end of the day, the students still have to do the work themselves. We are just giving them the tools and the support they need to be able to do that work. And it is so fulfilling. Every finals week, I have at least a half dozen students tell me that I have changed their lives for the good, and I have helped them live their dreams. It is amazing. You don't get that all the time. And I can't think of any work I'd much rather be doing. I am so passionate about the right of everyone with disabilities, and this union has helped me not only support our other fellow workers, it has helped me support workers with disabilities across the nation. I am also the head of our caucus chair for workers with disabilities, and we're working on a national campaign to help educate workers on their right to reasonable accommodation in the workplace. A lot of workers don't realize that invisible disabilities are still qualifying disabilities. Things like
Message Plus is using battery. Tap for details on battery and data usage.
anything that impacts your ability to work and you need some kind of reasonable accommodation around, whether that is a more flexible work schedule, some accommodation around attendance, or a screen so it doesn't trigger your migraines on your work computer. Some things that are so simple and basic allow people to really excel and do their best. And we are under attack right now. Not only unions, our rights as just the general populace as well. The ADA, which is something that has stood and been a nonpartisan question this year, we have seen recently be undermined. So, and all of these things are tied together. The rights of workers, the rights of people to access, all of these things, we have to stand up together and fight together. And undermining unions undermines our rights to come together and win these battles. It undermines our ability to stand together and stand up for people with disabilities, both in the workplace, in the school place, at home, going out to restaurants, just being with family and living their lives. We have to stand together. And I wanted to I wanted to ask everyone here if you could find out more. If you don't know about your union, if you don't know how you can support the union, what we're going to need in this new time is for people to believe in their unions, for people to contact their unions, find out how you can be part of this. We are the new labor movement, all of us together. So all of us need to figure out what we can do to stand strong and stand together.
Yeah!
Thank you, Heather. All right, so Tacoma has a long history of being a working class town. And today at this rally, we not only have faculty, classified staff, students at UW Tacoma, we have some alumni as well, but we also have people from other labor unions who are organized throughout Tacoma, people from UFCW, the Tacoma Labor Council, other groups. So I want to take a minute to thank those other workers for coming out and showing their solidarity with UW classified staff and faculty.
Yeah!
I also want to take a minute to celebrate that working class history of the city of Tacoma before we welcome our next speaker. We're going to do that with one more chant. All right, so if you look on your chant sheet, we're going to go to the very last chant on the page. And for those of you without a sheet, this one goes, right to work, better back down. Tacoma is a union town. Yeah. All right, all together now. Right to work, better back down. Tacoma is a union town. Right to work, better back down. Tacoma is a union town. Right to work, better back down. Tacoma is a union town. Right to work, better back down. Tacoma is a union town.
Yeah!
All right, and at this point, I'd like to welcome our next speaker today, Anders Ibsen from the Tacoma City Council. Anders Ibsen.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. How's it going, everybody? You guys fired up about fighting for working families?
Yeah!
All right, cool. So thank you so much for your invitation here and for all that you do fighting for working people here. It's my privilege to represent you as Deputy Mayor for the City of Tacoma. Mayor Woodard sends her regrets, but I'm here to tell you that the progressives of the Tacoma City Council support you in your efforts, and apparently so does your county prosecutor, Mark Lindquist, in the back. Let's give all these fine people a hand real quick. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is getting really old, isn't it? Every time it just seems like you just turn around and there's some plutocratic extreme right-winger who's blaming all of your problems on working family, on people who work for a living providing a service to you, like teachers, firefighters, professors, janitors, social workers, what have you. Somehow their fault. It's somehow your fault that we're in the state that we're in, right? It has nothing to do with the trillion-dollar Trump tax scam. Nothing at all to do with Paul Ryan coming after your Social Security, nothing at all to do with the $9 billion handout to Boeing, and somehow the thousands of jobs still left the state anyway. No, it's somehow your fault, right? Where I come from, that's called a damn lie. Don't you guys agree?
Yeah!
So we stand with you. And regardless of what happens at the Supreme Court level, there's so much we need to do right here and now to fight back. We need to organize like crazy, both in the private sector and publicly. We need to continue fighting for policies that make it easier for you guys to organize, that make it easier for us to achieve union density, that remove barriers, and that also pass pro-working family policies that make it easier not just to organize, but to live, to earn a decent living in the city of Tacoma. And that might seem daunting, that might seem extremely challenging, but 3 years ago, when the city of Tacoma joined the cities of SeaTac and Seattle to pass local paid sick and safe leave, local minimum wages, people told us it was impossible. We did it. We still did it. And it became the basis for statewide law, and it also became the basis for statewide paid family leave, so that families don't have to make harsh decisions between taking a day off to take care of a sick kid or losing their job. That's a false choice that no one has to make, and because of the work that you did, forcing us to do the right thing, we achieved it. There's still more we have to do, but it all comes down to work and human agency. We don't have their we don't have their money, we don't have their political corruption, but we have numbers, and we have the, I think, the moral high ground here. Don't you guys agree with that?
Yeah!
So we fight, we win. That's what this is all about. That's what the history of the labor movement is. That's what Tacoma is all about. So again, I'm deeply grateful for just seeing all of you guys working so hard on this. We're here to help you. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you so much.
Woo!
There we go.
All right, folks, I want to wrap things up with what I think are three really, really crucial points about public sector labor unions and about labor unions generally in the United States. All right, first of all, we have to know that labor unions raise wages for everybody, and right to work lowers raises for everybody and exacerbates existing inequalities. Whether we're talking about gender pay gaps, whether we're talking about racial pay gaps, unions make things better and right to work make things worse. The Economic Policy Institute has done a whole lot of research on the benefits of unions and on the negative impacts of right to work. So in a study from 2015, the Economic Policy Institute found that wages in right-to-work states are 3.1% lower on average than wages in states where that are not right-to-work. This is all workers, not just unionized workers, right? Non-union workers in states that are allowed to unionize, they make more money, right, than workers where they have right-to-work laws. This difference of 3.1% amounts to $1,500 per year, right? This is a sizable difference. In another study published in 2017, the Economic Policy Institute found that women working under union contracts are much, much closer to pay parity with men than women without union contracts. So overall, women make, according to this study, 83 cents on the dollar, and among college-educated workers, women make 73 cents on the dollar. Women, boo, right? This is terrible. Women in unionized jobs with contracts make 94 cents on the dollar, right? So we're still not there yet, but that's a lot closer to parity. And that's significantly better than 73 cents on the dollar. Unions also address the racial pay gap. All right, so wages for African American unionized workers are 17% higher than without unions. The second point I want to make about unions is that labor unions and being a member, an active member of a union, facilitates and encourages political engagement and political participation. In an article published in the academic journal Social Forces in 2013, scholars Jasmine Karasi and Evan Schofer found that union members are more likely than non-members to be politically engaged, including turnout in elections and participating in political demonstrations, especially among less educated and lower wage workers, people who are the most politically disenfranchised most of the time. In a draft of an article published in 2017, researchers James Feigenbaum, Alexander Hurdle Fernandez, and Vanessa Williamson noted that right to work reduces political participation, including turnout, particularly among likely Democratic voters, and this leads to further legislation and policies that are hostile to working people in right-to-work states. The third point I want to make, and this is the most important point for me, I teach here at UW Tacoma, but I'm also a member of the steering committee for UW Faculty Forward, our faculty union. The most important point I think we should all take forward from this event today is that it's more important now than ever that members of unions remain active and remain engaged in their unions. Unions are only ever as strong as their members. Unions are only ever as effective as their members make them, right? So we've got to stay engaged in our union. We've got to participate in events like this. We've got to continue to demonstrate and act on a sense of solidarity as workers, as members of the UW Tacoma community. This is, as Mike was pointing out when he went over the history of right to work, right? This is nothing new. Right, the Janus decision today is going to be the culmination of decades of efforts by bosses and corporate interests to disenfranchise workers of their right to organize. Right, so we have to continue fighting. We can't just roll over. We need to continue moving forward as a labor movement and continue fighting for our rights. We have weekends, 40-hour weeks, child labor laws, workplace safety regulations, sick leave, and loads and loads and loads of other things, including disability accommodations, because of the labor movement. We need to defend those gains of the labor movement. We need to continue fighting for even more rights for workers, and we need to resist what corporate interests in the right wing are trying to do in order to erode our rights as workers.